At the back of my closet, there was a red dress I hadn't worn in 19 years. It hung in a plastic garment bag that had grown cloudy with age, the silk still a defiant, unapologetic crimson against the sea of charcoal grays and sensible navies that had become my uniform. I remember my fingers tracing the zipper, feeling the fine teeth under the plastic. It wasn't because it was worn out or because it no longer fit. It was because one morning, a lifetime ago, I looked at it and a thought, quiet and sharp as a pen, entered my mind. This isn't for me anymore. Do you have a piece of clothing like that? One you can't wear, but also can't throw away? Just tell me yes or no in the comments. It's a strange kind of loyalty, a loyalty to a person you're not sure you even are. It wasn't until I started this project, this so-called decluttering at 77, that I asked for the very first time, who was it for then? If that crimson dress wasn't for me, who was it for? And when exactly did I make that decision? Why? The questions hung in the air, thick as the dust motes dancing in the light. The dress had been in there for 19 years, and the answers had been in there with it, buried under the weight of a career, of expectations, of a life that asked me to be smaller, quieter. I just hadn't been brave enough to look at the evidence. Today, I'm going to show you the evidence I found in my own closet, and I'm going to tell you what I decided to do about the person I had stopped being. It began with a practical suggestion from my daughter, but it quickly became an archaeological dig. The closet was too full, too dense to make sense of, so I did the only logical thing. I pulled everything out, every last piece. The air in my bedroom grew thick with the scent of cedar and forgotten perfume, a dusty fragrance of time itself. My back began to ache as I piled the contents onto my bed, the sheer volume of it all shocking me into silence. A mountain of fabric, a lifetime of identities, all jumbled together. The severe charcoal gray wool of Gloria the lawyer, the soft, uncertain pastels of Gloria the retiree. The closet stood behind me, stark and empty, a blank slate I hadn't seen in decades. My hands, grayed with dust, sifted through the layers, feeling the history in the textures. I wasn't sorting, I was excavating, searching for something I couldn't name, and the weight of it all was immense. And then my fingers brushed against it. The cool, unmistakable slide of silk, buried deep. I pulled it out, the old plastic garment bag crackling in protest. The red dress. Without thinking, I unzipped the bag, stepped out of my sensible trousers, and slid the dress over my head. The fabric settled on my skin like a memory. I turned to the full-length mirror, expecting to see a stranger, a costume. But the woman looking back wasn't a ghost. My shoulders pulled back, my spine straightened. My body remembered a posture my mind had long forgotten. And that's when the verdict landed, not with a whisper of nostalgia, but with the cold, irrefutable clarity of a fact presented in court. I stopped wearing this the year I made partner. It wasn't a decision, it was an erosion, a slow sanding down of my own edges to fit a role. I hadn't lost a dress, I had archived a woman. My daughter called me on FaceTime that afternoon, her face framed by the crisp collar of her doctor's coat, her hair pulled back with the same ruthless efficiency she applies to everything in her life. I panned the phone across the bedroom, showing her the mountains of fabric, the archaeological dig sites I'd created on my floor. She blinked, her expression a mixture of love and profound confusion. "Mom," she said, her voice patient, logical, the same voice she uses to explain a diagnosis. "You're overthinking this. Just make 3 piles. Keep, donate, trash. If you haven't worn something in 2 years, it goes. 19 years? That's not even a question." She meant well, of course. For her, a closet was a filing cabinet for life, a problem to be solved with a simple algorithm. For me, standing in that room, I was beginning to realize it was the scene of a crime. She was right, of course, from a certain point of view. A closet is a problem of logistics, and her 3-pile solution, keep, donate, trash, was ruthlessly efficient. But listening to her logical, loving voice, I realized her method was like trying to perform surgery with a sledgehammer. It would clear the space, but it would destroy all the evidence in the process. My problem wasn't the volume of clothes. It was the weight of the verdicts they represented, the silent judgments I had accepted about myself for decades. I wasn't just clearing out a room. I was reopening a case I didn't even know I had lost. And you cannot do that with a simple checklist. You need a different set of tools, a different set of questions. So I hung up the phone, took a deep breath, and decided to stop sorting. I was going to start investigating. So my first rule, my first real habit, was born out of sheer desperation. Standing in that bedroom that looked like a fabric store had exploded. I called it the empty slate. I had tried for days to sort things inside the closet. A shirt here, a pair of trousers there. It was like trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon. The system was the problem. So I did the only thing left to do. I made a bigger mess. I pulled everything out, every last hanger, every forgotten scarf, until the closet was a stark, empty box. The air was thick with the scent of cedar and thyme. And I just stood there, looking at the bare walls, the empty rod. The resistance was immense. Every part of my logical brain screamed that this was inefficient, chaotic. But it wasn't. For the first time, I wasn't in the problem. I was outside of it, looking in. That's when the real work could begin. Seeing that mountain of clothes on my bed, completely separate from its container, changed everything. I realized you can't possibly understand the story of your life when all the chapters are crammed onto one shelf. The change was immediate. I wasn't just looking at clothes anymore. I was looking at an inventory, a collection of evidence laid bare. The sheer volume of it all, stripped of its neat and orderly context, forced a kind of reckoning. It was the only way to see the truth of what I'd accumulated, not just in fabric, but in identities. You can't make sense of your life by tidying up the edges. You have to be brave enough to dump it all in the middle of the floor. You cannot assess your life in its current container. To see what you truly have, you must first create a vacuum. With that empty slate behind me, I ignored my daughter's logical three-pile system. It felt administrative, not human. This led to my second habit, archaeology, not sorting. I didn't group by pants or shirts. I sat on the floor, my knees complaining, and began to create new piles based on time. One pile was for Gloria the young mother, full of soft, washable cottons that smelled faintly of baby powder. Another was Gloria the new lawyer, all sharp angles and unforgiving wool. The textures told the story. My hands could feel the difference between the hopeful, stretchy fabrics of my 20s and the rigid, armored textiles of my 40s. The initial resistance was a feeling of foolishness. This was sentimental, slow. It wasn't decluttering, it was reminiscing. But I pushed through, trusting the process. And slowly, the piles on my floor began to look like a timeline. They were distinct chapters of a life. I could see the woman who wore each uniform, and I could feel the distance between her and me. This wasn't about what to keep. It was about what had been. I could see the exact point where the vibrant colors faded into a sea of charcoal and navy. The change wasn't in my closet yet. It was in my understanding. I was no longer just a woman with too many clothes. I was a historian of my own life, examining the artifacts. Your closet is not a random collection. It is an archive. Identify the chapters before you try to edit the sentences. Think about your own closet for a second. What's the oldest version of you still hanging in there? Tell me in the comments. After the archaeology, I hit a wall. I knew the history, but I still didn't know what to do with it all. I'd hold up a blazer, a perfectly good, expensive blazer, and my mind would start its closing arguments. It still fits. It was expensive. You might need it. This constant internal debate was exhausting. That's when I discovered the third habit, purely by accident, the physical test. I decided that for any item I was on the fence about, staring at it wasn't enough. I had to put it on. I had to let my body testify. The resistance was one of pure vanity and fatigue. I didn't want to try on 20 different outfits for an audience of one. It felt silly, time-consuming. But my mind was an unreliable witness, so I decided to consult a higher authority. The verdict my body delivered was swift and irrefutable. I'd slip on a blouse from my lawyer days, and before I even looked in the mirror, I could feel my shoulders hunch forward, a phantom weight of courtroom dockets settling on them. Then I'd put on a soft, worn-out cardigan and feel my entire posture relax. And of course, there was the red dress. The moment the silk touched my skin, my spine straightened, my chin lifted. My body remembered a confidence my mind had filed away. The change was profound. I stopped listening to the chatter in my head and started listening to the truth in my bones. Don't just consult your mind, consult your body. It holds the muscle memory of every version of you. This physical testimony led directly to the fourth, and perhaps most crucial, habit. Putting on the clothes revealed that the old questions were all wrong. Does this still fit? Is a question for a tailor. Is this in style? Is a question for a magazine. I needed a question for a life. So I created a new rule. Before any other question could be asked, one had to be answered first. Is this still who I am? I remember holding that charcoal gray blazer, the one I'd won my first major case in. It fit perfectly. It was a classic. But I held it to my chest and asked the question, and the answer was a silent, resounding no. The feeling was not nostalgia. It was alienation. It was a costume for a character I no longer played. The resistance to this question is fierce, because it's so much harder to answer than, does this zip up? Answering that one question honestly became my sharpest tool. It was the scalpel that could separate the past from the present. It allowed me to look at that powerful blazer, thank it for its service to a woman who needed its armor, and then place it gently in the donate pile. There was no grief, no guilt. It wasn't a rejection of the woman I had been. It was an honoring of the woman I had become. The change was liberating. I wasn't discarding clothes. I was releasing verdicts. I was pardoning myself from sentences I didn't even know I was serving. Utility is the wrong first question. An item's usefulness is irrelevant if it no longer serves your identity. Have you ever put on an old piece of clothing and felt like a stranger? I want to hear about it. After all that excavating and cross-examining, I was left with a much smaller pile of keeps and a vast empty closet. And for a moment, I was stuck again. I had a clear record of the past, but no blueprint for the future. That's when the final habit emerged, not from looking at the piles of fabric, but from looking at the empty space. I called it curate for the future, not the past. I took out a fresh legal pad, Old Habits Die Hard, and at the top of the page, I didn't write a list of items I needed. I wrote down 3 words. 3 words for the woman I wanted to be right now at 77. The resistance was internal. It felt arrogant, presumptuous. Who was I to just invent a new self and then dress her? It felt easier to just live with the ghosts of the past, but I wrote the words anyway. Vibrant, present, unapologetic. Those 3 words became my new constitution, my new dress code. The change was that I stopped looking backward. I went back to my small keep pile and put every single item on trial against those 3 words. A soft gray cashmere sweater. It felt like a hug. It was present. It stayed. A beige trench coat that made me feel invisible. It failed the vibrant test. It went. The red dress. It was the very definition of unapologetic. It became the cornerstone of my new curated collection. I wasn't just clearing out a closet anymore. I was making space. A decluttered closet isn't about honoring who you were. It's about making space for the person you are actively choosing to become. It took me 77 years to understand that a closet is not a place where you store your past. It's a place where you rehearse your future every single morning. We think we're just choosing an outfit, but we're not. We're choosing a character for the day. And when most of the costumes in your collection belong to characters you no longer play, you are limiting the roles available to you. You're trying to perform today's script in yesterday's wardrobe. The most profound act of self-love isn't buying something new. It's clearing out the old evidence. It's giving yourself the quiet, empty space to decide, with no pressure from the ghosts of who you were, who you are finally ready to become, right now, today. All right, now it's your turn. I'm not talking about organizing. I'm talking about honesty. So I want you to go to your closet, not tomorrow, today. Open the door. Just look. Everything in there you haven't worn in a year is a story you're telling yourself, and it's usually a lie. The lie that you'll lose the weight. The lie that you'll go back to that job. The lie that you might, one day, become the person who wears that again. Your closet is the most honest mirror in your house. It shows you exactly where you are stuck. So here is my challenge to you. Right after this video, find one thing. One thing you are keeping out of fear, not love. Hold it in your hands, feel its weight, and ask it out loud. What part of me are you keeping hostage? And then you decide if you're ready to pay the ransom. So I kept the red dress. It no longer hangs in a cloudy plastic bag at the back of my life. It hangs at the very front now, a slash of defiant crimson. I wore it to my granddaughter's graduation last month, and as I zipped it up, the cool silk settling on my skin, I realized I wasn't trying to be the woman I was 20 years ago. I was simply, finally, letting her out. I understood in that moment that she never actually left. She was never lost. I had just stopped letting her speak, burying her testimony under decades of sensible wool and quiet, reasonable verdicts. Your most important stories, your truest self, might be hanging in your closet right now, silent. Don't let the best parts of you gather dust. Let them speak. If this is a conversation you needed to have with yourself today, and you'd like to have more, then I hope you'll subscribe. We have many more cases to open.